our first of the year fast, where we want to prioritize Jesus at the beginning of the year so that we can watch him work and move throughout all of 2025. So the older I get, the more afraid of heights I am. And the further along my life goes, the less I want to be on top of a ladder. But here's the odd thing. The things that I don't want to do anymore because as I get older or, I guess less coordinated, whatever it is, I tend to like to watch those things more. So one of the things I like to do is I love to watch people who do things at heights, like on top of buildings or on top of ladders, people who, those crazy people online who jump from building to building without nets, and also then tightrope walkers as well. So let me introduce you to a new word, a word that you might not be familiar with. There is a word called funambulist, spelled with F-U-N, funambulist. And that is a word that describes tightrope walkers, really expert tightrope walkers. And so there's a book called Off Balance on Purpose by a guy named Dan Thurman. And in the book, he talks about funambulists. And what he's talking about, and this is what's fascinating to me, there are two things that really catch my attention here. First of all, he says that funambulists are never actually on balance. He says people who walk tightropes are always in the act of overcorrecting to one degree or another. So they're always working back and forth. They're never settled. They're never still. They're always making these micro corrections. And that's what allows them to appear like they are constantly balanced. I thought it was fascinating. So I'm going to read from Psalm 121 verses 1 and 2 in just a moment. But I thought it was fascinating, first of all, that the idea of walking at height, walking in a difficult situation, walking a tightrope that requires perfect balance actually doesn't require perfect balance. It only really requires us to be committed to making adjustments along the way as we move forward. And so let me read Psalm 121, 1 and 2, and then I'm gonna tell you the second thing about the book or about tightrope walkers that fascinated me. I think we're all walking a tightrope. To a degree, we're all trying to stay in balance. We're all trying to stay in the will of God. We're all trying to do our best to make it from the place where we start to the place where we're supposed to end without falling. And so in Psalm 121, the psalmist, this is a psalm of ascents. So this would have been one of the psalms that they read as they went up to Jerusalem for Passover, and because it was uphill. Jerusalem was an elevated city. And so these are the first two verses of Psalm 121. Many of you will recognize this. This is not a new passage, but the psalmist says, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. That's familiar to many of us. We know that psalm that we elevate our eyes, we elevate our gaze to find our help. What's fascinating too about the word I lift up in the Hebrew, it's the word nasah. And the word nasah does mean to lift up, but it also means, same word, it also means to be lifted up. It doesn't just mean to lift up, it means to be lifted up. And I think part of what the psalmist is saying here is that when I begin to elevate my gaze, I find that I'm not the only one lifting something up, but I am the one who's being lifted up, which leads me to the second thing that I read about funambulists, and that is this. And I'm going to read a quote from Thurman's book. He said this: when new people who are trying to become tightrope walkers step out onto the cable for the first time, they almost always begin with the same flawed game plan. He says this: they stare downward at the wire to ensure that they have the proper footing, and so they fall. So what is the solution, he says, to this dilemma? Because if you look down, you're going to fall. If you pay too much attention to what your feet are doing, you're never going to make it across the wire. He says, if you've ever really closely watched professional tightrope walkers, you may recall that they never look down at their feet or at the wire or at either side at their hands or at their balancing pole. Rather, they keep their head up and they look forward toward the goal, the faraway platform that is in front of them. It's such a simple principle, right? But it's so beautiful because in order to make those micro corrections, in order to correct in a place of imbalance, the answer is not to focus on our feet or to focus on the terrain that's causing us imbalance. The answer is not to look out from side to side. The answer is to look forward and to face the goal that we are headed toward and allow that to bring us the ability to walk correctly in places of instability. You can see the spiritual application. In a time time and in a season when we are trying to establish our walk. At the beginning of 2025, we want to be establishing our walk so that we can make it to the goal, to the end of this year, having walked in the presence of God, having walked with the presence of God, having walked in balance with Christ, understanding and knowing and walking in the fullness of the blessings he has for us. All of those things are true, right? But here's the beauty of what we have access to. We don't have to know how to walk. We have to know where to look. We don't have to be really great at figuring out every detail of the balance. We have to be willing to face the one who is calling us toward him. And then in that, we will figure out naturally how to make the small adjustments that allow us to walk the longest way across this beam. When we lift our eyes toward Jesus, it's not just us lifting our eyes, it's us being lifted up and held up by his strength and his presence. Must I remind you of the easiest application in the Bible, the easiest story that points this out? When Jesus called Peter to get out of the boat and to walk to him on the water across the stormy sea, what we know is that when Peter was watching Jesus, the storm was unable to cause him to fall. But when Peter stopped looking at the goal, suddenly all of the things that could cause him to fall did cause him to fall. Friends, can I tell you, in 2025, there will be a million things that will come against your life that want to cause you to fall. There will be a bunch of things that will try to cause you to stumble. There will be a lot of things that try to get you off balance. They literally have zero power to cause us to stumble if we're looking in the right direction. But the temptation is always to take our eyes off of the goal and to look down at what's going on, is to try and balance ourselves by intent instead of allowing the focus point and the goal of our life to become the power of balance in our life. Where do I lift up my eyes in times of trouble? I lift up my gaze to the God who made heaven and earth, because that is where my help comes from. Today, what are you focusing on? What are you seeing? What are you paying attention to? What are you looking at? Because the issue is going to be, you're going to be tempted to look at all the problems and all the difficulties and all the things that want to throw you off balance. And the Bible and truly the testimony of Scripture is telling us, if you want to make it through, if you want to get to the other side, if you want to walk this journey in balance, it will require us to focus on the one who's calling us to the end. Fix your eyes upon Christ. Listen to his word. Walk by faith in every way that he's asking you to. And the wind and the waves and the tightrope and all of the breeze and all of the swaying and everything that wants to make you fall will have no power to make you fall today. It seems simple, right? Except it seems like it's also the most difficult thing that we can possibly do. Focus on him, let him be the answer, and you will make it safely to the other side today. Blessings.